Allen Adamson, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
I'm looking forward to it.
Look forward to getting some of your insights, including talking about your book, Seeing the How, Transforming What People Do, Not Buy, to Gain Market Advantage. Before we do, Allen, would love to know a little bit more about you. Whereabouts did you grow up? And how has your upbringing impacted the kind of person you've become?
I was very fortunate to have grown up in the suburban area near New York City. I'm a first generation American. My parents both came to this country with the shirt on their back. The lesson there is that nothing is given to you, and everything you want in life you can get if you're lucky, you're hardworking, and you're committed. When people read that book, they often comment on some things in the book, but they talk about the dedication to my dad and he made in this country from sweeping factory floors on up.
When I was reading your book, I was reflecting on one of the key points that you make, Adam, is this shift from product innovation to experience innovation. Why do you think there has been this shift?
It's because the challenge of creating a new product, a better mousetrap, is so intense. Even if I come up with a better mousetrap, a better phone, a better product, but the time you have that better product until a competitor matches it or beats it is shrinking and shrinking. I was lucky enough early in my career to work for Unilever, and I worked on Dove soap or the derivative of Dove, Caress. And there was a better product back in those days. It had a better formulation. It didn't, quote unquote, dry your skin the way soap could. And you could then tell that story and over time build a business and a brand. Today, if you had a better cleaning product or so, the moment you would have that to yourself would be tiny. And so necessity is one reason. The overwhelming choices. You walk down any aisle at Target or a supermarket, and there are 20 shampoos you can buy. There are 20 cereals, there are 20 shirts, and there are just so many that if you don't zoom back and say, I can make a better shirt for you, but maybe there are other ways I can make my shirt more relevant to you and fit into your life, fit a little better, easier to buy, easier to wash, easier to return. And so zooming out for products where I grew up on in the world of brand management, product management, it's been happening slowly and it's accelerating. And it's a critical skill for success in almost any business you go in today.
I couldn't agree with you more, Alan. Even though you mentioned the example of products, I see a lot of service organizations that try to do the same thing, talking about being better. What you mentioned is that it's very hard to maintain a competitive advantage and to be able to communicate being better in order to differentiate.
Yeah, it's much harder. I agree with you in services and professionals because everyone is saying, we have a solution. We're going to solve your problem. We're going to add value. And then they go to the usual and look at our people are better. But you read their bios and CVs are the same. And then they make up a process. We're going to do this 4-step process to make you better. And everyone's process. And so unlike a toothpaste where you can brush your teeth and you can see 12% better whitening or lower cavities, you can't do that with professional services. You got to hire them. They got to solve your problem. You're not doing a side by side. I'm going to solve half my problem using Debbie and half my problem using Mark and see who does a better job. It's much more difficult in professional services.
We can go through industry by industry. I've seen it in healthcare. I was having a conversation with the CEO of a healthcare organization in the greater Washington, D.C. region. They have a lot of hospitals and a lot of same day care facilities where people, instead of going to the emergency room, go to these places. And he was talking about the fact that their differentiation is not the innovation in healthcare, it's how smooth the process is for people who want to walk into their clinics, quickly be seen, quickly have their needs addressed, and be able to walk out.
And again, as for any experience, the challenge is not inventing the experience, it's delivering it. Lots of people have hotels and they say how lovely the stay is going to be. And you know that at half the hotel, somebody's going to spill something on you. The room's not going to be ready. I mean, it's the theory is easy. The execution is hard.
And I wonder about that, Alan, because part of what you also emphasize is the need for that understanding of the customer journey. That said, since I got my MBA almost 30 years ago, people were talking about customer journey. I don't think there is a single person listening to this episode who wouldn't nod and say, aha, yes, it's really important to know what the customer goes through, see things from the customer's perspective. Why is it that organizations struggle so much being able to map out and understand that customer journey?
I'll give you two reasons. One of them is every company I talk to says, oh, we're very customer centric. When you dig into that a bit, you quickly find that the people furthest from the customer are usually the people leading the company and the people in the company. They might read a research report, but they go in with a fixed worldview. They go in and say, this is what my people, they stop listening. I remember when my son was very young, we'd walk on the street and every car was fascinating to him. He would see things with fresh eyes. What's this? But when we're in business, this is how it's done. We make the product available. We do it, write a proposal. There is such a resistance to observing what is that you forget to look at everything with fresh eyes. The other point is it's rapidly changing. The customer journey, you think the way people buy cell phones hasn't changed. You open the box, you turn it on, up. But every customer journey is constantly evolving. And the biggest challenge is seeing those evolutions before someone else does or everyone else does, and then deciding, is that interesting? And can I unlock a point of touch that's now emerging that I could be better in with someone else? So if no one has fresh eyes anymore, they all know their customers, but the customers are changing, the journeys are changing, and they're running a movie from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when they say, we know our customer journey.
Those journeys are changing really fast. For
Right.
example, nowadays, I'm unlikely to order from a website if they don't ship next day
It's
because
either yes or
Amazon
no.
has said that.
The issue is more not looking at what is. Here's a customer journey. Now, how at retail do we get stuff on the right shelf? How do we get it home faster? But just applying a different lens, which I talk about, is what could be. Consumers won't tell you that they want delivery in 5 minutes. They might tell you that, but they won't tell you that, gee, if you want to return something, everyone talked about free returns forever. And I was out visiting my daughter a couple of years back at university, and I went to her sorority house. And the porch of the sorority house at the university looked like the shipping and receiving dock from a major logistical company because every kid was ordering Target and Amazon. But when you talk to the kids at the house, they all knew how to order, but none of them knew how to return. They didn't really know where the post office was. They had no boxes. They had no printer for the label. So while I was at free returns, for that customer base and for many customers, free returns is a hassle. And so there are lots of startups now are looking at that with fresh eyes and saying, wait a second, what happens if it's a company I talked to a year or two, Return Queen. They'll go to your front door. They'll take all your boxes, all your stuff. They'll pack it up. They'll ship it back and they'll email you when the refund should be hitting your credit card. So all of a sudden, everyone in the category says, oh, we're very competitive. We offer free returns just like Amazon. And they're not imagining, gee, well, maybe free returns is not the answer. Maybe hassle-free returns or not having to go to the FedEx office is the type of return I want, or not having to go buy shipping tape at Staples is a return I want. But consumers won't tell you that. They will never say, gee, wouldn't it be interesting if they picked it up from my door and I could just leave it in it? So the problem with the journey is that consumers only have the rearview mirrors. They can tell you what they want if they see a competitor offer, but they can't look down the road.
How can organizations try to find that out, Alan?
You have to use a catalyst. You have to use something to get them to reimagine reality and go in with what happens if we did this? What would you do? For years, this was a HBO Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry David tries to open something called a blister package. And he's using a scissors can, he's using a hammer. And, for years, everyone says, we're very customer friendly. We put everything in a blister package. It's right there. You can see the whole product. But no one wondered how do you get into that without a jackhammer? And if you had said, look, you could buy this product with a blister, or you could buy this one with a zipper. But if you don't suggest the problem and say, look, we're looking at 3 new ideas. We always used to do this. here are 3 new ways we're thinking of helping you with our product or service. We could do this, and you have to find the edge of the table. You can't, and the edge of the table, meaning something not realistic or not, may not be right, but it'll get people to say, that's crazy. I don't need somebody to come pick up my packages for me. But what I would like is them to put in another box inside the other box with a label already on it. And then all I have to do is hit a button on my phone and then somebody will ring my doorbell. But if you don't have the stimulus, you can't get people out of this is the way it's always been. I line up to go to the movies and then I rush to get the seat where my neck is not going to hurt you in the days when people used to go to the movies. Until somebody started saying you could reserve the seats online. And so every innovation, usually you rarely get it, as you said, sitting down at the table and say, tell us about your last use of our pizza and what you didn't like about it. In fact, I worked for Pizza Hut many years ago. I shouldn't have said the brand name. And we asked consumers, what do you like about Pizza Hut? And they would say, oh, the taste is good, the tomatoes, the crust. And they were all very enthusiastic. And then somebody, smart researcher we used to work with, said, let me ask you, if Pizza Hut, what would you want in a business? What would you do? And instantly, I would just go to Papa John. No one cared. The fact that it was good. Ooh, they were saying it was good. But the minute somebody said it's out of business, there was no friction. There was no reason to go there because the product really wasn't that much better. No one shares average. And so you have to go into research with something like a question like that or some other, we're reimagining ways to rent cars. Here's 3 ideas. And they don't have to be the right ideas, but they have to help your audience say, hey, come to think of it, I can't open that blister package.
So in that reimagining, Alan, what role does a version of what I typically see and recommend of a minimum viable product play? Even in my Carnegie years, when we were opening up in different countries, my key point was don't go with what you think the need is. Don't go with the surveys. Don't go with what people have told you. Try it out and see what gains the greatest traction before investing a lot of effort and time into it.
Right.
So, a minimum viable product strategy, in essence, how does that play a role into what you're describing?
Yeah, I think you answer part of it, which is you can't go in with that lens. Part of it is 2 things driving the market today. Word of mouth has become really important, and no one shares ordinary. No one says, I had a good experience. The product was basically okay. It cleaned my shirt. They showed up on time. The deck didn't have spelling errors. The team, and no one shares ordinary. And you either share, oh my God, they came in to do a presentation and they forgot the presentation or they were not prepared, or the extraordinary. So you have to go into any experience, say, how do we get someone to say something? How do we get them to post something or tell? No one recommends average. Yeah, but the bar is really high today. People used to be that you were happy with any cereal that didn't get mushy when you poured milk on it. Now there are 20 cereals that don't do that. So just having the bare minimum cereal requirements it's just much harder.
I love that no one shares the ordinary, and you're absolutely right. Now, this relates to a couple of CEOs that I work with, and they believe that their customers are a lot happier with them than they are. And it reminds me of the experience we had with a magnificent CEO in Dale Carnegie. I'm still friends with him, an amazing guy, very open to feedback, very open to soliciting people's thoughts. But when he wanted to come on a visit, for example, to Italy, first the salespeople had talked about which one of the customers really loved us. Then the general manager of the city had screened it. Then the country manager. Then I would look at who they wanted to interact with the CEO. Then the CEO was visiting with people, getting feedback. So, what do you think? And it was an extremely biased screened sample where he would tell you, "Oh, people adore everything about our process," because that's a sample he was exposed to. And I see that with a lot of executives that I'm working with now.
Yeah, I think that it's a milk run. No one wants to look bad. And the other piece is that when I looked at companies that didn't change with the time, my previous book was called Shift Ahead. And why did so many great brands disappear? They didn't shift ahead. Overconfidence and saying, ain't broke, don't fix it, were probably the number one and two reasons. And you have to take a bit of the former chairman of Intel, only the paranoid survive. As a leader, you have to currently be worried that what worked yesterday is not going to work tomorrow versus the natural gravity. It ain't broken, don't fix. So you constantly have to fight that as a leader. And you constantly have to be impatient. I think great leaders are impatient because how long is it going to take you to make this better mousetrap? The research, the market moves fast, and being first doesn't mean you win, but it does mean you have time to optimize and fix it and iterate and execute. Being last means time is up. You have to get it out really quick. It may not be any different. So I think impatience and being overconfident and being a bit paranoid.
I love that I quote Andy Grove all the time because that's the sense that keeps you ahead, especially at a time when, for a whole host of reasons, the pace of change has picked up. Therefore, it requires that sense of paranoia. Now, you also mentioned that embracing innovation requires a cultural shift in the organization. A lot of people talk about that need for cultural shift, but that's really hard to do. So, what would you recommend to organizational leaders or managers of teams in how they should shift the culture of the organization so they focus more on experience innovation?
A couple quick stories. Story one is when I spoke to P&G about this several years ago at Innovation and what the challenges were. The feedback was that their challenge was that people coming into P&G, the young people they hired, saw the need for change. The leadership saw the need for change. But the middle was incredibly risk averse. They all had college tuitions, mortgages. Their biggest fear was rocking the boat. So ideas came in and they got stuck in the middle. And then, yeah. There is another story, which is how do you see these things in time to move on and to be innovative? How do you not get stuck in your mud, become a stick in the mud? And another HBO thing, many years ago, HBO was a client. I really enjoyed learning from them. And people would hire summer interns from good schools and then put them in a cubicle before AI and say, here's a bunch of papers, summarize them. And then at the end of the summer, they come out with their report and then leave. But way back then, HBO said, look, we're going to hire our interns and we're going to assign them to the C-suite. We're going to stick an intern with every C-suite executive to make sure that executive knows that AI is here. So should the people live off phones to keep them, to open their eyes. So I think part of it is realizing that the job of a leader today is not to optimize a process. Yes, it's important you optimize and the importance of executing. But a job of a leader is to inspire people to try to look down the road, try to look around the corner, try to have courage to say, we've solved a lot of these Apple mice. Things are going to change. And can't we get it to work with a finger on the screen? And you have to have a team that constantly looks at what is and says, gee, let's think about how else we can stay ahead.
That is really challenging while there are lots of priorities that people are juggling. Therefore, sometimes focus on customer experience is not top in the priority list.
Yeah, and because a lot of it is always often about the numbers. I worked with a large health insurance company, and they had updated their customer experience, and they trained all the people to be, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. You got that splinter in your foot. It must be very painful. So they trained them forever on how to be more empathetic on the phone. But then they also came in and said, look, finances said we're spending too much money on customer service. Try to make your calls look shorter than 90 seconds. Whatever you do, and if I track that you're on the phone for 4 minutes, that's going to be bad for your career, no bonus. Of course, people will say, oh, I'm so sorry, but I got to go, and we can't. The financial need to drive it always trumps the intentional need I need to become. So you have to create the reward system that, of course, rewards for risk, rewards for innovation, And of course, it has to reward for performance. Otherwise, you get a bunch of people saying, of course, the package didn't make it there. It didn't get delivered. But one day we'll be able to use a hologram to deliver it. And because we're working on tomorrow, the old AT&T ad, that you'll be able to do this with a phone tomorrow. They had the picture phone in the 70s, and it took 30 years to get it from one day you'll have this to everyone having a picture phone in their own hand.
I love the objective and key results system, and John Doerr has a great book that popularized it, Measure What Matters. And part of the point is every CEO, every executive would say, yes, customer experience really matters to us. Measure
But it's
what
not on the
matters.
dashboard. The sales results on the dashboard, the margins on the dashboard, the repeat customers on the dashboard. Have we come up with a new point of touch on the customer journey? Isn't even on the windshield, and nothing's there.
Now, in order to be able to innovate, you also mentioned IDEO's approach to user centered design. How can organizations use that to design better services for their customers?
I'm a big believer in observational research, whether you're watching somebody taking a hammer to a blister pack, because people behave more openly than they talk about. Oh, it's fine. No one wants to deliver bad news. The best designers often have been in the category for a while as customers. Lots of innovations happen from customers. The other thing is that in companies, we are so fixated on playing tennis and not golf. So what do I mean by that? Yeah, I played both terribly, but in tennis, I try to watch where my opponent is and I try to hit the ball on the other side. So I'm very fixated on the person across the net. And in business, that's true. When I worked for Pepsi, they were fixated on Coke. When I worked for Unilever, we talked about Procter& and Gamble all day. When I worked with P&G and Gillette, it was all about Schick. But as everyone knows, none of those companies were disrupted by the person right across the net from them. They were disrupted by somebody from behind, somebody on the side. And in golf, you play with other people, but you really have to pay attention to your own stroke, the wind, the course. You have to be more in tune with those. You have to have more of a peripheral vision. So I think part of it is zooming out a bit and paying attention to not your direct competitors. Yes, you have to be competitive. And if Pepsi's offering 2 cans for $1, you can't offer 1 can for $4. But innovation often happens. Gillette did not get nailed by Schick. They got nailed by some guy who started the Dollar Shave Club who couldn't remember to buy razors and then didn't want to wait for somebody to open the security thing. Constantly pretend you're looking at the world and go back to that very classic Harvard Business School article from 40 years ago when we were in business school, 30 years ago, marketing myopia, which is people look at the world this way no matter how much they try to. And the more people you have around you that will agree with you, oh, great idea. And the more people that went to the same fraternity and grew up in the same, the more narrow your tunnel vision of myopia gets. And so if you're constantly all going to the same bar for dinner and you're all talking about the same stuff and you all shop at the same store and you all look like the old IBM salesmen from the 70s with white shirts carrying their briefcases, you have to first realize that you are looking through a peephole on the marketplace. And if you don't get better glasses, zoom out, no amount of leadership is going to dig you out of that.
I love a couple of points that you made there, Alan. One is that there is a need for that cognitive diversity, which comes from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and the psychological safety that goes along with it to have the kind of conversations that it takes. Along with that, I really like the analogy between golf versus tennis, in that I was having a conversation with the CEO of a local membership organization, and his main focus was on similar business membership organizations. And my point was slightly to your case. That's not what they are losing to. It's all of those organizations are losing members. It's from outside of their view where they have their blinders on competition.
Right. And that's very common. You can go to a law firm, they hire brand experts from the law business. If pharmaceuticals are in the pharmaceutical, not many people look at the market horizontally. And as and many people know, the theory is that A lot of innovation is not coming up with, oh my God, I invented lightning in a bottle. It's, gee, I wonder if we could do something like Amazon does in our category. Or I wonder if we could do something like Target does, using horizontal vision and horizontal exposure to understand that.
It takes a combination of courage and it takes deep thinking, Alan. One of the challenges that I find with many of the executives I work and interact with is they are so overwhelmed with the flow of what they have coming at them, trying to keep pace with the ongoing business that very rarely do they step back to do the kind of deep thinking analysis that you were talking about.
Yeah, there was a book by the New York Times columnist Tom Friedman a couple years back, and it was called "Thank You for Being Late." And when I spoke to him about it, he said, "Gee, yeah, I'm so overscheduled that if somebody is late, and those are the days you used to go to meetings and not just click on Zoom." He goes, "No, done that." He said, and somebody came out and said, "I'm sorry, the meeting is running half an hour late. Can I get you a coffee?" He says those 30 minutes allowed him to just thank you for being late. I can do some thinking. I could do some, and I had a conversation when I was interviewing folks at Facebook 8 years ago. And when they wanted to do innovation, they issued something called a hall pass, which meant an executive on a team that was meant to figure something important out got a hall pass. So they didn't have to attend these 15 mandatory meetings. So they didn't have to go to the HR thing, the finance thing, the how to tie your shoelace safety meeting. They were able to clear their calendar because if you look at most people's calendar, and now Zoom or it's virtual meetings, because people used to need, at least when I was pre-pandemic, I'm still in New York City. I couldn't schedule meetings 1 at 2:15 if I had to rely on the New York City subway to get me between the subway. You had to, in New York, you had to assume, you were going to get run over by bike messenger. The subway was going to get stuck. You had to build in a buffer zone. Now that world, so you can look at somebody's calendar today who does virtual business, and they barely have time to put in a new light bulb on their Zoom light between problems. It's much worse because, and you're also in an office and you rarely see, for my teams, I really struggled when we had tough problems, strove to get them out of the office, to take them to an environment where their computer wasn't pinging with emails, where they weren't sitting in a conference room, where we were able to just exhale. And I often had different stimulus in the room, whether we looked at a competitor or whether we looked at a different business or a speaker, something to help them just breathe, because big ideas don't happen when you're sitting in front of your desktop ready to type in, here is my recommendation, step one. Big ideas happen when you have some perspective.
And it takes that ability to disengage and disconnect, which is very hard, to give us the space if and when we prioritize this customer experience to really see what the customer journey is like in order to be able to innovate and go outside of the established patterns.
Right.
Otherwise, when under pressure, we come up with immediate things that come to our minds, and those are the obvious answers. Innovation isn't in the obvious.
Right, exactly. Another thing I talk about in my book is that when you're in a particular, I speak to a client in the beer business or in the technology, they are often really good at that business. I've been in the beer business for 20 years, Alan. Here's how we do it. They've learned it. And they tend to hire people who've been in the business for 18 years. You have to force yourself out of that ball and to get back to the 5-year-old kid saying, look at the hubcap over there. What's that over there? And isn't that interesting? It's easier said than done.
It really is. And as you said, whether it's people's backgrounds and or industry experience, which is prioritized in almost every executive role that I see people hire for, we tend to surround ourselves with people that have very similar perspectives on the world around them, know what can be done, and through experience, know what can't be done. Therefore, that makes it less likely for innovative thinking rather than someone that asks the stupid questions because they haven't been around long enough in that industry to know it can't be done.
Every innovation, I'm sure, has been, did you ever wonder why we couldn't do this? And yet 9 out of 10 of them, 18 out of 20 are probably crazy and you can't do it because, but You got to see that one or two and have time to get it right because product, people think it's about getting the first idea. No, it's about getting the idea soon enough that you can get the best execution of it. The iPad wasn't the first tablet. I was working with Dell as a client, and they had plenty of tablets. The Apple got it right from the user experience to the way they depicted it. Other marketers at that time, computer, were showing people using tablets sitting at their desk. Apple showed it with somebody on the couch with the iPad on their, and so they understood that this was not a substitute for a desktop or a laptop. It was a substitute for getting information in a completely different context. And if you didn't unlock the whole journey, you were ending up trying to sell a tablet to someone who's perfectly functional on a good PC with a screen.
So in unlocking that journey, circling back to that, Alan, I'm thinking about an organization that I work with, and a lot of the interactions with customers, some important customers, is through email. They might end up calling. So, how would you go about looking at the customer journey when that's the level of interaction with your customers through email and or calls as opposed to the way it works with a lot of products or in
It's
retail?
really hard. It's really hard because a couple of the clients are set up to screen 9,000 emails and pick. So and people as humans are used to just make it simple. And emails are just such emails, calls, or texts. They are such a challenge. There are some companies doing quick micro videos, but even that is cluttered and crowded. I think just pushing to the problem with emails is people have they evaluate their performance as to how many clicks they can do and how fast they can clear their inbox. Not did they find the right service and the right partner. No, and people look for the quick. Oh, I can't hire this person. He's got a blue shirt on. I can't hire this person because he grew up in Cleveland and we don't sell any products in Cleveland. So I don't have a solution to that other than to say the more look like a duck, quack like a duck, walk like a duck. And if you just follow conventional wisdom in everything you do, here's how you write a proposal. Here's how you write an email. Yes, it has to be it, without some disruption. And a lot of people doing disruption for ridiculous reasons. And there has to be, I'm actually more optimistic that brand matters more because while everyone can communicate directly, the world's too complicated. People need shortcuts. I can't figure out the right consulting firm to hire for this problem, but at least I know some consulting firms. There's Bain, there's McKinsey, there's Accenture. At least I have some. I'm not going to rely on an email to say, let me tell you about our 14 practices. So it's really hard, as you pointed out in the beginning. Professional service is the worst because everyone has smart people, everyone's in a solutions business, it is really hard. If you don't try, you will certainly fail. You're better off trying three things that don't work and then going back to the tried and true. To some extent, I look at innovation and say, it's like watching 7-year-olds play soccer. Everyone's around the ball. Everyone's in defense. Because anytime there's a shiny new object, everyone's saying, oh, here's an AI-enabled email. And everyone's grasping for the same things. Sometimes zigging when other people are zagging makes us. We did it in marketing. We'd say, look, let's not spend all this money on the latest social media thing. Let's have just better packaging in the store. Let's have a better return policy. Let's do sampling. So sometimes going back to something that is not the trend of the day will give you a better shot than others.
Actually, one of the thinking rules or mental models that Bezos used to refer to quite often is that what stays the same, focus on that, not only just what changes. So there are certain things that stay the same and you can double down
And
on
pick
that.
your battles. Because the other thing that goes on with customer journeys, I don't want to get too into the weeds, is that everyone tries to do everything consistent. Instead of saying, which touch point can I really win at? We'll do okay, but let's instead of taking $10 and spending $1 on each touch point, let's spend $3 on all the touch points and pick one touch point to put all your chips on and say, what can we do in packaging? What can we do in customer that would really wow somebody as opposed to, oh, this package has a nice yellow label. I guess it's brighter.
And it circles back to what you mentioned that we share exceptional experiences, not
Right.
the normal or average experiences. There might be one or two of the touch points that make it an exceptional experience for that customer. That's where you want to innovate. That's where you want to spend time and effort, energy, and resources on. You also talk about leveraging technology, Alan. Would love to know your perspective on the technologies that you believe can be most impactful in improving that customer experience.
I think we're in the middle of it now with AI. I do think that you trying to make any purchase online, you still have to put in your credit card now. You have to write your address. Your phone doesn't know what's on your calendar. Yeah, that's all going to change dramatically. And so all of a sudden, a ton of friction is going to go out. That's a table stake. If I want to buy something for you and I want them to, when they see me, they know me, they know which credit card I want to use. It's in there. They know I don't like delivery on Tuesday, but I like it on Thursday because my dog won't eat it on Tuesday. The table stakes are going to be enormous and certainly getting better at those. And then you can either win on that or you can win on something else. But yeah, I don't think because everyone's chasing that AI thing too. I think, the first wave will be about everyone will be frictionless to work with. And you'll have a bunch of people like the old Star Trek Vulcan mind melds. They'll know exactly when you say, I want to have dinner on Tuesday, they'll know your phone will know that what he means is he likes to go to the Chinese restaurant on Second Avenue and he wants to have Debbie, the waitress there. So they'll know that. And in that world, it will be a very different challenge to look at the customer journey because everything will be easy. It will be like having James Bond, Mrs. Moneypenny's assistant, who hands you the case. Here's your papers. Here's this. Who knows and prepares you. In my book, I talk about everyone talks about customer service, but what's going to be you need to see like a concierge to it to be successful in business. Not just say I need a solution, but they have to know, gee, what type of solution are you looking for? And a good concierge won't say, I'll make you a dinner reservation. They'll see you have two kids screaming at you. Your wife is unhappy. You're tired. They'll know you don't want to get in a taxi and you want a place across the street. You don't want to wait. So see like a concierge is going to be table stakes. And you got to make sure your organization can do it.
AJ Agrawal has written a couple of outstanding books on AI, prediction machines, and power and prediction. He talks about the prediction capabilities of AI based on the data. And therefore, in many instances, the AI will know what you need before you need it. So it can transform that entire customer experience as well.
Exactly. But that will mean you'll have the same problem in 90 days, that everyone's journey will be the same as yours. And you still won't, because winning an AI, unless you want to buy the latest ChatGPT 72, that's why I'm pretty bullish about Apple's play in this area, which is, yes, AI is going to be critical, but if I can get it to be as simple and work in my phone, which runs my life, it's going to be far more powerful than me getting to a terminal and saying, what's the best restaurant on 78th Street?
AI in this instance becomes a tool, making what you mentioned about understanding that customer experience even more important. There are parts of the customer experience where the AI facilitates, and there are part of the customer experience that human connection and ability adds real value and can become a differentiator. So understanding the customer experience also it lets you know where AI can play a role and where it will not be a
Where I
substitute.
can, yeah. And if you overpromise on that, you'll say, I went ahead and ordered a blimp for you because I know you like blimps. Yeah, it's like having a bad concierge. So I think there'll be a lot of people with mud on their face. And then I do think the human piece matters and figuring out how you can make sure you have a human component to your customer journey. Because I'm an old movie buff, and to my generation, when you say AI is going to run your life, I go back to the movie 2001, where the HAL system says, Dave, I can't do that right now. And there is this fear of, I want an AI assistant, but I also want to know how to unplug it and get to a human behind the AI.
Now, As we think about this, Alan, I would love to also get your thoughts about one of the things you address in your book, and a challenge that I see is that a lot of organizations have very complex systems in the way they interact with customers, and there's a rationale behind why the person goes first to point A, and then they have to go to point B, and then they have to go to point C. There is reasoning behind that. How do you recommend for organizations to think about simplifying complex processes so they can improve that customer satisfaction?
Yeah. Again, the theory's easy. When you call up somebody for how many times you call customer service, I have to transfer you, I have to transfer you. Data is fragmented, and that requires you to rethink everything you do because when I call my bank or American Express or Delta, I don't want to say, is this an international trip or am I rebooking a trip? Or I just want to say, here's my problem. You figure out who to get me to and make sure that person on the first call doesn't have to send me a how-to guide and speak to 4 supervisors. So it's gonna it just because you could have a lot of data and we're gonna be still left with the age-old data problem, which is I have a ton of data, but no insights. And everyone was going from the facts to the insights is what business is all about. No, everyone has the facts. Everyone knows that people buy this product on Tuesday at this store. It, everyone knows all that, but why and why not and what matters? Because the more data you have, the more you're going to be buried in the weeds and not able to see the forest and the tree.
It is important not to get buried in that data because we do have access to it. There are now tools to help decipher it for us, but that doesn't necessarily lead to the insights that you talk about, Alan. I
Right.
would love to know from your perspective, Alan, as the audience is listening to this, they recognize the importance of experienced innovation, understanding the customer journey. What is the challenge you throw down to the CEOs, executives listening to this, in addition to reading your book? What is the challenge you throw down on where to start, how to start?
I'll give the advice I got when I took my first job out of business school. And I went through some interviews, 9 rounds of interviews, and I was all set to answer questions that I learned in business school, read my case. And the CEO back in those days had a big office. And, I was all ready to sell him. And he said, "Listen, Alan, you had a good day here and you answered a lot of good questions. People like you. I just have a couple of questions. Tell me about the last museum you went to and what did you find interesting? Tell me about the last show you went to and the last book you read." Completely. And he made a mistake of hiring me, or they made a mistake. I said, "Why do you ask the question?" Because he felt the role of somebody in his company was to be the client's eyes and ears, to see what was going on out of their bubble and to stay in touch. So for any executive today, there's so much pressure to look at if your team isn't optimized, you make sure you get your head out of the rabbit hole and your role as a leader is to help the organization see what's coming, understand what's going on, and help them connect their world to the future. Not so much if you just use this pen, you'll be able to write in the days people knew what a pen was, 12% chance.
What outstanding advice, Alan. How can the audience find out more about your book, follow your writing and your work?
I'm on social media a lot, Allen at metaphors.com. I do write a lot. So if you Google me and if you have any questions, you can even do something like reach out to me. I'm happy to, as long as they say I've heard you on this podcast, as opposed to just randomly found you somewhere else, I'm happy to chat with people.
I really appreciate the insights, Alan, on your book, seeing the how, transforming what people do, not buy, to gain market advantage, and great practical takeaways for executives as well. And I couldn't emphasize your last point more. I love it. It's a great challenge for the leaders to think about the role that they need to play in moving their organizations forward. And what you said is a great challenge to them. Thank you so much for the conversation, Alan Adamson.
It was terrific chatting with you, and thanks for inviting me.